Fireside Chat for Wise Women Initiative for Social Entrepreneurship, February 18th to 2021. Today is a very special day. We have a very special guest. But before I start, I would like to say good evening, good night, and good morning to all, because I know that this is open to all our colleagues, a lot of our partners across the globe. Welcome to our fireside chat with a very, again, distinguished guest, and I hope a new friend, Pamela Reeves. This is part of the bigger movement of WISE, Women Initiative for Social Entrepreneurship, which is a global movement where we are hoping and we are going to redefine success from a gender, but also a social entrepreneurship lens, where we are trying to elevate and recognize the impact of social entrepreneurs who are women and how they do change the world. We believe that there are ways to really acknowledge that. So we created our own or redefined the way we measure. Scale up to us is when you change laws, and by changing laws or policies that affect a particular group, in a negative way, you don't only affect them now, you affect them also because the law has been changed for generations to come. So even people in the future. Scaling deep is when you change mindsets and beliefs or bad traditions. And again, this is scaling deep, where we delve inside, try to change the mindset, and it does not only affect the population we're working with, but their children, grandchildren, and again, future generations. And of course, scaling out, which is the normal metrics borrowed from the business sector of franchise, replication, and reaching more people. The three are very important. We don't think one is less important than the other, but we believe that the three types of scale up, scale out, and scale deep must and should be recognized by the ecosystem, by the investors, by the policymakers to really evaluate the impact of women. Today in the Fire Chat, we have a guest, a distinguished guest, a woman whom we believe is a role model, whom we believe will share with us her story. We will delve in her life, but also her ideas, her values, and her insights into making impact. She will share with us the challenges she met, but how she overcame these challenges, and also how 2020, which means really COVID-19, is really and should be seen as a way forward for women, but also for the world. Her vision is very important for us, and her impact on the ecosystem and on really advancing our movement is very important. So let me introduce Pamela Reeves. Pamela previously served as a director of Secretary Hillary Clinton's International Fund for Women and Girls at the US Department of State, as the consulting senior advisor on gender strategy to the executive office also of Melinda Gates. She also served as the UN Human Rights Officer in Liberia during the country's civil war, and has worked in over 20 countries on governance transitions over the past 3 decades. Among the first also, and I think this is personally very important for me, Pamela was among the first, if not even the first and only woman to work in international development. Reeves is a trustee of Brown University and serves on the boards of directors of Women for Women International, Kenya's Dream, and the University of Global Health Equity in Rwanda. There are many other things, but it will take the whole time if I explain or I describe what Pamela has done. I want to thank you so much, Pamela, for joining us, and welcome to our Fireside Chat.
Iman, thank you so much. And I want to thank you for all the work you're doing. First, I'd like to thank Ashoka, and not just for the work you're doing all over the world, but individually, each of you, the social entrepreneurs, are really moving change across the globe. And you're doing it in your own way, and you're doing it in a textured, authentic way, and you're really making a difference. I know Ashoka, especially through my dear friend and mentor, your President Emerita, Diana Wells, who is just a spectacular human being and somebody I admire endlessly. And of course, Iman, I know you and your work, which is a tremendous boon, getting women together, all the writing you do, all the work you do, and of course the team you lead. And I also want to thank Claire Davenport, who helped put this together, and all the other Ashoka team members. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I have so many questions, so we'll take it as we go, and I hope our 45 minutes, they will not cover all the things I want the people to know about you, but we'll try. And maybe this is the first until you come and visit me in Egypt.
I'm ready.
Okay, so Pam, you have advised on gender strategy for female icons, icons like Melinda Gates and Hillary Clinton. Now, from this experience, what strategies for changing existing biases around gender have you found most successful?
So, I mean, part of your introduction there is exactly the point. I have had the privilege of working with some of the most creative and most committed women on the issue of gender equity and women and girls advancement. And that makes all the difference in the world, right? If you can see it, you can be it, we say, but there just aren't as many women that serve as role models, at least in the day, as they say, when I was coming up. So I felt very, very fortunate to work with such amazing women. And so what makes the change? What's the strategy? I'm gonna first really concentrate on data and the importance of data and evidence. So, you can approach a problem with a gut feeling, but you can't solve a problem without data. If you don't know what the problem is, you can't solve it. And we've done yeoman's work in collecting data over the years. I mean, we're so far ahead of where we were even 10 years ago on that. A lot of work still to go. So let me give you an example. So interestingly, in America, only 10% of all patents are held by women. 10%. That's nothing, especially because women do excel in certain areas of education. We have more degrees and sort of more and higher education, but 10% of patents. And we know from our research that one of the reasons is that when a patent application comes in with what's called a common female name, Mary, Susan, it's discarded. It's simply not read. Versus one that comes in with a common male name, Robert or John. Now that's fascinating, but it is not insurmountable. That is a barrier of obviously implicit bias, but we can design around that, right? We can blind the application, right? We can take the name out. We can train the readers not to be dismissive when they see a female name, to get past that hurdle. There are a number of things we can do, but you've got to have the data to be able to make those kinds of changes. And that brings me to the corollary of that, which is listening, right? We also need, we don't just need quantitative data, we also need qualitative data. And I'll tell you, so I worked on something called the Girl Declaration with the Nike Foundation. We were trying to get girls' voices, adolescent girls, on the 2015 agenda. So they're now called the SDGs. They didn't even have that name yet. And we went around the world, the Nike Foundation, we went around the world with partners asking girls what they wanted, what they needed, what they were afraid of. And I personally was in Mexico working with a group of girls in the urban area, girls living in poverty. And at first they were very suspicious and reluctant to talk. And I speak Spanish, and I finally said, what's happening here? And one of the girls said to me, nobody has ever asked for my opinion on anything. Nobody has ever asked me what I thought. So we're all confused and we don't understand what's going on.
Oh.
And then lastly, I'm going to say about what it takes and what the strategy is: commitment. Deep, long, persistent commitment and dedication to making the change. And I will say, you see that with these individuals with whom I've worked. You see it with what Ashoka is doing with your individual social entrepreneurs. There are these really amazing models of persistence and commitment, and that's how change happens.
Wow, this is so, it's really amazing. You have worked over, with over 20 government transitions. We now find ourselves in a position of transition again and uncertainty on a global scale. Based on your work, what advice or words of wisdom could you share with the audience about how we can overcome the crisis period. I mean, I think regardless of the winning that happened in America, I think we are in a crisis period. We're in a crisis period in the States, but we're in a crisis period with COVID. And I think we're in a crisis period politically all over the world, really. Do you see this moment as a portal for progress for women, an opportunity for us? What do you think?
So first I should confess that I am an optimist.
Good,
I'm
that's good.
enthusiastic and I am optimistic. So I'm going to say this, there is no silver lining to COVID, I'm sorry. But I will say that this is an opportunity to build something out of this crisis. And all the crises you named, you're right, they're all happening at once. They're conflated. It's a bad moment, but it's something that we can, we're resilient as a people, particularly I think women, right? Somebody gave me a gift once, it's a little thing, and it says, "You can't scare me, I have children." Right?
Yes.
There's so many things that we are just purpose built for as women. So, I want to say this. So the principles of transition, and it doesn't matter what you call it. It doesn't matter whether you call it democracy, participatory governance, the idea that people should have a say in how they are governed and not be dictated unto, right? I think that's universal. That's an aspiration that we all have. And those principles are every voice is heard equally, right? Everybody is educated about the issues that they should care about equally. We call it civic education, but it should be universal and it should be equitable. And then you cast a ballot, and every ballot counts equally. Every vote is counted equally. And then whoever wins, your guy or the other guy, and I do say guy advisedly, more and more it will be a woman, it needs to represent everybody equally once in power, whether they supported that person or they didn't, right? That's the principle. But you know, and everybody watching this knows, that we still deal with corruption and the lack of transparency and biases, implicit biases, prejudices, outward biases. We still deal with biases, right? So that's our challenge. COVID did not create these challenges. COVID surfaced the problems that many of us have known existed for a long time and put them in stark relief. So women, we know, work more on an hourly basis as opposed to being salaried than men. So when the hourly work dries up during COVID, or somebody has to stay home, it's the woman who suffers, right? That is a systemic problem that if we had solved earlier on, we might be in less of a quandary now. I mean, we're still going to have a problem because of COVID, but there are these things that hit women worse: health, education, staying at home, all of these things. So to borrow a phrase from the new American president, we now have an opportunity to build back better. We now have more communications, more people are talking to more people across the world. I'm sure there are many countries represented here in the audience. I did not have to travel to Cairo to see you. We're talking online. We have an internet, doesn't reach enough people, but it reaches many, many people. And that allows us to really understand and to gather and to advocate collectively. And I think that is going to make a difference at this crisis transition moment. So I don't think we'll go back to where we were before. I think we'll go back to somewhere better.
I love your optimism. It's really good. Now, you have worked, as you said, one of the first, if not the first woman in the international development, then with, Hillary Clinton, then with 20 government in transition. I mean, you worked a lot with the government, but you also worked with Melinda Gates, and you're on Brown as a volunteer and other projects. Now, for us, we believe that one of the things women everywhere are good at is scaling deep. And as I said before, scaling deep is changing mindsets and behavior and attitudes, which really are much more important and long-term impact, have a long-term impact than anything, Now, in your world, in your own work, do you believe this form of impact is powerful? Have you done it? Do you think it's important? Do you think it should be recognized more?
That is the question, right? I think you've hit it right, the nail on the head, as they say. I think scaling deep is that's it, because as you say, a change here, a change there, it's not sustainable. We need to make structural change. We need to make systemic change. And in my opinion, probably the most important thing that I do, maybe it's because it's one of the things I love the most, is teaching. So I teach at university level, and I teach about human capital, investing in women for global growth, for example, is one of my classes, and national security, and including cross-border issues like gender equity. So when I teach about the importance of equity and including women, so we talk about, for instance, corporations, right? We talk about the wage gap, and we talk about promotion gap, women on boards. But when I talk about that, I go all the way to help these young people, I mean, they're in their 20s, not that young, help these young people understand the real issue is the way we value women and girls, and the way we talk about rights and the equality of rights. So I start with girls' education and prenatal sex selection. And that, and you might say, what does that have to do with women on boards, right? It has everything to do with it, because it speaks to the value that we place on certain individuals over others, on women, girls. And so I think when you can arm these young people, men and women, at the university level with information, they can go out in the world and they can understand that they can question what's in front of them. So when they confront these systemic failures, they have information, they have actionable information, and they have some techniques and skills to be able to act on what they know is right. So we talk about power a lot for women, and what does that mean? A lot of people talk about harnessing your power, which is a critically important thing to do, right? Because it's not just what you do, it's the potential that you have. And if you can harness that potential, you are a force. But what some young people don't understand is that power can be created. If you understand, if you have the information, the knowledge, you see what your strengths are that maybe nobody valued before, so you didn't think it was a strength, or you have skills that you didn't think were skills. You just thought you were good at some things, but nobody applauded you, so you didn't know it was worthwhile. All of those things add up to a power that you can take forward in the world. And I think that sort of, I hesitate to use this word, but that sort of pipeline issue is what's going to take us forward. The questioning, the actionable information, the knowledge, the ability to create and harness power, that is what women are, that's what's going to take us into the future, and we're going to skyrocket.
Your positive energy is wonderful. I need it.
I'm sorry.
No,
I was
go
just,
ahead.
You see young people and they're full of energy and they're full of possibilities. And it's not until they get out into the world and people start saying, oh, no, you can't do that. Oh, no, you can't. Oh, we're not going to hire you. Or no, barrier, wall, that you begin to get a little beaten down. And that's what you have to strengthen, right? That's where they have to be prepared. And they have to say, I mean, you can tell me I'm not going to do it, but let me tell you I am going to do it, and here's how. And if you have that kind of ability, if you have that kind of confidence, and I use confidence, you don't have to have the confidence the way that everybody says, oh, I'm such a confident person. But if you have the information and you know how to use it, you can have confidence.
This is a great segue to my next question, because one of the reasons we have this fireside chat is also to showcase cases of successful women who are and could be role models for younger men and women, by the way, but the younger generation. And I think although there is a revolution in social media, yet what really happened is that young people speak to young people, and mature people like us, I don't like calling us old, talk to each other. But I think this is an opportunity for every age and every gender and ethnicity, because it's open and it's going to be recorded and really spread, to listen. Now, as a woman who was really one of the first pioneers in her field and who has accomplished a lot, I want you to share with us not only your success, but actually the challenges and how you overcome them. Because also, I am not an advocate of women coming in and talking about challenges. If you are here and I am here, and we're both women, we have overcome challenges. And that's that's our message. That, as you said, you have to try until you make it. So I would like you to share with us a little bit of some stories, some incidents, projects, whatever, where you were faced with tremendous challenge, but you overcame that.
So, yeah, I hear you, Iman. You're so right. So I started the career that I'm in now in international affairs in the 80s. And it is true that when I worked in what we used to call sort of democracy and governance work abroad, my first project was when Noriega was the dictator in Panama. That tells you how old I am. I was young. I really was the only woman. I mean, there were a couple of women doing other projects, but the sum total was 3, 4. And I did not have any women role models, and I did not have any women mentors. I had mentors, they were men. Now that's an interesting way to start your career, right? I mean, I learned a lot. I learned that there were ways to do things, which is not actually true, but that's what I was told. And I did my best. And I was constantly talked over, left out, ignored. I think one of the ways I overcame some of these challenges, and it was because of my upbringing. It was actually because of my education. Was they couldn't ignore me because I was the only one that could go to Latin America, because I was the only one that spoke fluent Spanish. I was the only one that could go to Haiti because I was the only one that spoke French. Right. So that's a skill set. Again, my education, I was very good at my writing skills were very good. And so I could write, talks or reports or whatever it was. And so I had to call on those skills because my presence was not valued, right? It was my skills that was valued. Nobody was really turning to me and saying, Pamela, what do you think? We'd like to hear your voice. That didn't really happen. So many years later, I was the human rights officer in Liberia during the Civil War. I worked for the United Nations. I was the only professionally ranked female in the United Nations mission. There were other women there. They were, I don't know if you know how the UN does it. There's the professionally ranked and the administrative ranked. So there were some other women there, but they were on the administrative side. And I would sit in on the senior staff, I don't know if you call it staff, but the senior meetings every morning where we do the situation report. Again, Civil War, a lot going on. Charles Taylor was still there. And there I was, not only the only woman, but the only American. I think I'm the only American, not just the only American woman. So we're dealing with a lot of different cultures, a lot of different, perspectives. And I just sat still and quiet for the first 3 weeks. I didn't even know if they saw me. I don't know if they knew I was in the room. And then there's one time when I hear them talking about something and they're wrong. They're just wrong. And if I let them continue, then there might be an action or a policy and everything's going to turn upside down. So I raised my hand. I think some of the people saw me for the first time. And I said,
Wow.
excuse me, but actually, and then I say my piece. They didn't really love it that I was right, but it was undeniable that I was right. And then, it's not like I got thanks, a card or anything like that. But at least, it sort of changed the dynamic. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to not be afraid to say what we know is right, what is our opinion. I always tell young people, or not young people, other people who ask my opinion, men and women, so they ignore you. So they say no. So they say you're wrong. I mean,
Internet.
it's hard, right? It's hard, particularly in an unfriendly environment. But if you don't do that, you're never going to move forward.
I totally agree. I totally agree. Now, you're also on the board of Women to Women International, which is an organization that gives women the power to better their own lives, which really talks about community-based, actual believing in these women and the right to choose what they want, right? And to have real impact. Do you think, from your experience in international development or democracy, whatever it's called, what is the relationship between proximity and impact that you have observed in your work? I mean, we all know that across the history of development, there were these accusations that sometimes development comes imposed from above. Now you have seen on that board that really women can work on their own at the grassroots level. I mean, give me some stories, tell me where you stand, the two ways. When things were imposed, what happened? When things went bottom up, what happened? From your own experience.
So I have to say, my screen froze for 1 second. So I'm going to think that I heard your question and try to answer it. So, the world is changing, and we have a lot more information now than we did before. So when I started my work, there was no internet. There were no computers. I mean, there was no internet. There were no cell phones. You flew into a country that you didn't know anything about. Maybe you saw pictures in National Geographic. I mean, that's it. And you met people, and you did what we now call a needs assessment. There were no fancy words then. And you saw who was who, and you asked questions, and you did that listening exercise, right? And you brought that back. And in the United States' case, I can only speak for this country, aid and decisions about aid, humanitarian assistance, derives from our national security strategy, right? It's not just here. It starts all the way up at the top.
Wow.
I don't know if I am frozen.
You are frozen a little bit, but I can hear you.
So you can't do.
هو المشكلة عندي ولا عندها؟ ها?
Sorry, Pamela, you're a bit frozen.
She's frozen or am I frozen?
She's frozen.
Was I frozen?
Okay, you're fine now. Okay, go ahead.
Where did I freeze?
You started where it goes to national security.
Yeah. So my point is that you don't always get the opportunity to do what has been asked of you or what you think is right. Right? So you could go to a country and you think, I'll tell you what they really need, but that's not where our aid dollars are going this year or this 4 years or whatever it is. And remember that those are well considered, I'm going to say well considered, thoroughly considered policies. There's only so many dollars. Should there be more? Yes. But given what we have to decide what to do with them and spread them across the world and to spread them across different policy areas. So there's that part of it. I think what's happened now is that we're getting more inputs. There's more philanthropy, not just bilateral government work being done. And of course, there's always been multilateral work done, but that still relies on governments. And there's more wealth in more countries. So there's more cross-pollination there as well. So I don't think anybody would anymore talk about imposing. I mean, we talk about that, But that's not the way it works really anymore, except in the sense that whoever has the dollars, you do have to apply for that aid, right? So you do have to match their parameters. But I do think that NGOs, and Women for Women International is just one of them, but one that I think is fantastic, is really talking about internationalizing, right? I mean, they've always been very good about that. They're women on the ground, run the programs and that, but really internationalizing the way we do our aid and the way we do our work. And I think that's more and more what's happening. And of course, Ashoka has been doing that since time immemorial, right? Your social entrepreneurs do not come from Europe. They come from the community.
Yeah, local solutions to local problems. No, my question wasn't that all was imposing. I was just thinking maybe you can share with us, if you can hear me now, a program that you saw where it came from above for whatever reason, how it worked, and another program where when people were really, when whatever they asked for, the communities asked for, then it was more successful. That was the original question. You froze again. Dakar, you should be in Egypt, really. Hello? So is she freezing also, Claire? Or is it me?
Yeah, she's frozen.
Okay. So, and she disappeared or is she there? Pamela, come back to us. Okay.
Yeah, she disappeared.
Yeah. So can you see if we can reach her? Well, to our wonderful audience, thank you very much for, we'll try, we have 15 minutes, we'll see if she comes back. But I think it was an interesting conversation because we have this wonderful, successful woman who worked all over the world and who did, and she is from America and she faced a lot of challenges within her own country, but of course outside. Being the first woman to be within any group and to learn how to say no and to learn how to take the first step. And I think that is not easy. And I am really grateful. I'm really trying to get you. What? Are you back? Good. So are you back?
Yeah, my internet says it's on, but apparently it's not. I'm sorry.
No, don't worry. I was just saying wonderful stuff about you. Okay, so just before we leave, one of the things, and this is wise, the Women Initiative for Social Entrepreneurship, we are concerned about the impact of women to elevate the impact and to showcase that women have an impact. So from your experience, again, in your own country, I mean, you've been in America, you are in the States, I mean, you're in Dakar now, but you're living in the States, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and you're teaching all these young people, what do you see among the young women now, and what would you advise them? And do you think they are facing different challenges than what we faced, or opportunities? I mean,
Such a great question, Iman. So yes, and yes. So one of the beauties of the internet is also its greatest posing of a challenge, which is the challenge of aspirations, right? We see more and more what we could have or what we might want. And that reminds us of the distance between us and that whether it's a goal or that aspiration. And that's a real challenge. And when I think about countries where women really have no rights, but they sneak a look at the internet and see people like you and me having this conversation with full rights, saying whatever we want with no repercussions. I mean, that's dramatic. So yes, things are different. I will say this. I will always tell young people, life is long, right? What you are doing today and the job you might have next and the thing you are doing is not necessarily the thing you are going to be doing in 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And you have to remember that. It all adds up. And that life is not linear. So if you looked at my resume, you would think I did it all on purpose, right? But really, it didn't go like this. It went like this, my career. It went like that because I took an opportunity or I took a risk or I tried something new. And I ended up here today. You know, I had worked on some projects involving women specifically, but it was not until Hillary Clinton became Secretary of State and I got that call, would you come over and run the Secretary's International Fund for Women and Girls, that I really said, I will, because I understand the power of women and gender equity. And actually, that's what I'm going to work on. That's an opportunity that I grabbed. The other thing about that I see in women, more so than young men, is that they have an idea that if only I could, right? There's this idea that if only. And they think, many of us think this way, that there's a door, it's a secret door, and there's a key to that door. And if we only had the key, we could unlock the door, and on the other side, that's where all the stuff is, right? That's where success is. But the reality is there's no door and there's no key. We make our own power. We create it, we harness it, and we create that. It's not a door, we create what's in front of us. And we are the key. We have that power. So we have to remember that. We really, really have to remember that. And I think the last thing is, you might know the statistic that when women apply for a job, you know, they think they have to have every part of the scope of work. Men look at the list of requirements and they're like, yeah, I can do that. I only have 2 of them, but I can do it, right? So the corollary to that is that don't sell yourself short. If somebody thinks you're qualified for a job, let them decide that you're qualified. I cannot tell you how many women come to me and say, well, they asked me to do that, but I couldn't do that. I'm not ready. I'm not qualified. And I say, did they ask you? Did they ask you to do the job? Because they see something in you that you don't see. Take a risk, take the job, do the thing, go out there and do it. And I think those, you know, they're hard. I mean, we are wired to think differently. We're wired to think, even if we don't articulate it this way, that we have less value than others, right? We just have so much baggage that we didn't put there, right? The systemic and structural barriers have really done a job on us. But if we remember some of these simple things, life is not linear. Don't, you know, let others decide if you're qualified. Don't sell yourself short. There's no key. Things like that. I think we could see a lot more energy and success and power. And then everybody would be like you, Iman. It would be a much better place.
No, but I actually think what you said is wonderful from the beginning, because, you know, sometimes when they see a successful woman, they say, you say this because you're successful. But everybody who's listening, Pam had to stay on her one time in a place for 3 weeks, not able to speak, and then another place where nobody asked her opinion, but she continued. So I think hard work, resilience, and not undermining yourself are important. So, you know, I think she's not saying this as if it's easy. She had it the hard time, right, Pam?
Yeah, absolutely. Froze. And you know what? Am I back? Am I back?
Yes.
Okay.
You are back?
Yeah, and I'm back. I do have to say, it's not just women, you know, that suffer from disappointment, frustration. You know, it's to me, it's the kinds of frustrations and disappointments that women suffer that are so painful because they're unnecessary. And, you know, I tell my own children, well, of course you're not going to like your job. It's work. I mean, you know, who likes working? I happen to work in a field where I love everything I do, but still have to work. So, so there's, you know, I say all that with empathy. I really do.
I love you for this. I try to tell all the young people, you work hard until you know, and like what you're doing, but you don't leave jobs because you say, I don't find myself now. At the beginning of your career, invest in learning skills, including connecting with people, learning, you know, this is, yeah, I agree. Now, before we end, I want you to tell me, what is your dream? Because I think every stage of our lives, we want a dream, any dream. What is your dream? What is the dream of what? For you, for your family, for the world, for women, for whatever. Like, what are your dreams?
A small question. um, I will say that it is a dream of mine that all this work that we have done for women, for gender equity, that someday we won't have to do any more work on this topic. Someday it will be quaint because nobody cares anymore. What I wish is that nobody cared about what I talk about today because it's so commonplace. And that I do have, I have children, and I want them to have learned from what we went through, not just me personally, but you and Diana Wells. I mean, I'm just picking women from Ashoka, but all the people on this phone call or this Zoom call, we say we stand on the shoulders of women. Well, I want them, I want it to have made a difference for them. I want them, everybody's going to suffer challenges, right? That's what makes us human. I don't want them to suffer the same challenges. It's enough already. I'm very patient, but it's enough with gender equality.
You're right.
So that's my dream.
Yeah, mine too, by the way. Well, Pamela Reeves, thank you so much for a wonderful conversation, for giving us hope and sending all this positive energy. And I am an optimist too, and I love optimistic people. So again, on behalf of Ashoka and on behalf of Women Initiative for Social Entrepreneurship and my team all over the world, and my dynamo, Claire Davenport, who is making me work a lot, but also with the best regards from Diana Wells. We thank you so much for being here and giving us the time while you're in Dakar. So have a great night.
And Iman, I want to thank you and Claire and everybody else and everybody on this call for caring about this issue, for working on it every day, and for really trying to move the needle, because that's what you're doing. You do not sit still. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, by this we end this fireside chat, and be wiser, join the WISE movement, scale up, scale deep, and scale out. Love you.